Whenever a chemical arrives at your workplace, whether it is hazardous or not, you must ensure that you have obtained sufficient information about the substance from the manufacturer or importer or distributor. You need proper labeling on the container and included with the Safety Data Sheet (SDS). In this document, you can find most of the details such as chemical content, potential hazards, precautions, and so on. If you do not find the chemical content in both of these documents, you should contact your supplier to determine whether it is a hazardous chemical as defined in the USH Regulations 2000 or whether it is not a hazardous chemical. If the chemical is not hazardous, then you do not need to take any action except the instructions on the label. However, for hazardous chemicals, risk assessment is a mandatory process. The detail of the risk assessment depends on the risks involved. You need to take into account several factors in performing a risk assessment. Among them are: how will you store harmful chemicals? Could there be risk associated with that storage? Is it compatible with other materials? Can a spill cause a problem or disaster? And others. Most accidents occur while handling hazardous chemicals, so you need to look at the work process and ask, how do you use those hazardous chemicals? And by using it, you also need to consider how will you control it in your workplace. Do you need to provide safe operating procedures? Is adequate training provided to hazardous chemical handlers? Or do you need more detailed controls like building a local exhaust ventilation system (LEV) in your workplace? Next, you need to look at the emergency procedures for emergencies that may occur at any time. Ask yourself questions like this: is there a fire hazard? And if there is a potential fire, what do you need to do to control the fire? What is the suitable fire extinguisher to use? How are workers exposed to hazardous chemicals? Do you expose employees and the environment to spill hazards? And if so, what is the risk? And you should also consider what first aid measures are needed. Does the material require special equipment or materials for first aid such as special gels or eye wash at your workplace? After that, you need to consider the transportation factors and ask yourself, how will you transport these dangerous goods? Do you need secondary containment? And how do you control or avoid spills of hazardous chemicals during transportation? Next is the disposal activity. Hazardous chemicals must be disposed of in accordance with the Environmental Quality Schedule Waste Regulations. You need to know, how can you get rid of harmful chemicals if you don't want to use them anymore? Can it be dumped in monsoon waterways or sewage systems? And do you need to bring an approved scheduled waste contractor to dispose of it at a landfill? Finally, let's examine the record-keeping element. The questions you should ask yourselves are: what kind of records should you keep? Do you need to keep the chemical register or safety data sheet (SDS) or risk assessment report? What records need to be sent to Department of Occupational Safety and Health (DOSH) and the Department of Environment (DOE)? Here are 6 key factors you need to consider in management of hazardous chemicals in your workplace. 1. Risk assessment. 2. Handling. 3. Emergency procedures. 4. Transportation. 5. Disposal. And 6. Record keeping.